the Soviets, they like to imagine themselves having some form of umbrella protection over these ethnic minorities. And this is again what the Soviets, sorry, the Russians, the type of rhetoric that they used in 2022 in connection with the invasion of Ukraine, but they have also been using it in certain diplomatic spats with the Baltic states. For example, during the 2007 protests of the removal of a monument to the Soviet Red Army in Estonia, which angered the local ethnic Russian population in Estonia, many of whom had naturally been sent to Estonia after the Soviet invasion of Estonia in 1940. There are also similar, for example, in Georgia with the war in 2008, where you have North Ossetia and South Ossetia. And North Ossetia is in what is the Russian Federation today. South Ossetia is in Georgia, but the ethnic group of the Ossetians live in both parts. However, since those North Ossetians live in the Russian Federation and the South Ossetians in Georgia, the South Ossetia had been a breakaway republic, self-declared, but one which had received Russian help to de facto break free from Georgia in the early 90s. And then when Georgia was trying to reinstate its territorial integrity, the Russians attacked with a full-scale invasion of Georgia. They had naturally been provoking that situation in the lead up to it. The South Ossetians had increased their intensity of artillery shelling against Georgian-controlled areas of Georgia. So this protection of national minorities is something that the Russians have been doing for a long time. Another example could be seen in the breakaway Republic of Transnistria in Moldova, where the Russians had issued a lot of passports to the locals, Russian passports. And this is a policy which is called passportization, by giving passports to minorities, or sometimes not even minorities, just simply Russian speakers or people who used to be citizens of the Soviet Union. This is how the Russians now claim that they have a so-called responsibility to protect in other states. So these are some of the excuses that were used in 1939 as well. Another classic that the Russian propagandists use is that the Polish government had fled the country and the state had collapsed, and therefore all the treaties with Poland, including that non-aggression pact from 1932, were null and void by that time. However, if we look at the course of events, it is clear that the Russian, or rather the Soviet Union, invaded on the morning of September 17th, a moment when the Polish government was still in Poland. It was only after realizing that more than 700,000 Red Army soldiers had crossed into eastern Poland to aid more than 1.5 million German soldiers in the West, that they realized that the situation had become untenable and that they had to evacuate through the so-called Romanian bridgehead. So in southeastern Poland, this quite narrow channel, you could say, of territory, which leads to Romania, or at that point led to Romania, as the two countries shared a border, but which was also crisscrossed by rivers and was protected on the sides by mountains. So it was an area of Poland in which the Poles, they had decided to set up their defense. They believed that they had more than 350,000 soldiers that they had dedicated to that part of Poland, that had started building up defenses over there, various defensive positions. And they wanted to hold on there, as there were reinforcements in the form of weapon deliveries coming from France and other allies that were on their way to Romania. There was one ship that was just about to dock in the Romanian port of Constanta, which was carrying tanks from France. Another ship had just set off from the port of Marseille, carrying enormous quantities of artillery pieces and also ammunition. So the Poles, they were expecting initially for military hardware to come through Romania from their allies, but also since they had a military alliance with the French, and this was an alliance dating back to 1921, so the early 1920s, but there was also a fresh alliance with the British that was signed on August 25th, so just a week or so before the German invasion. So the Poles were counting on the British and the French to launch, even if limited, but nevertheless launch an offensive against Western Germany. However, according to the deal that they had with the French, that offensive should have started within 2 weeks of German aggression against Poland. However, on September 13th, there was a conference in Abbeville in France, in which the French and the British came to the decision that it was not feasible to launch a military offensive at that moment. Instead, but nevertheless, it's also quite interesting from today's point of view that there was a very, very limited offensive by French troops in the West.
Yes, but it was surprisingly limited.
It was a needle prick, really. If the French would have dedicated larger numbers of troops there, they would have very quickly realized that the western border was practically undefended.